not just saying, 47% of American workers are worthy of being trashed because they don't earn enough to pay federal income taxes. Actually, there's a fairly good breakout of this. Pat Garofalo wrote it over at the Center for American Progress's thinkprogress.org blog, What Romney Won't Tell You About the 47%. And this is really remarkable. Of that 47%, 44% of them are people who are on Social Security. They basically get elderly tax benefits. 44%. 30% of them are getting child credits for the working poor. So they're people who are working and are making so little money that the child credits, which, by the way, were passed by Reagan, although he had a Democratic Congress, that those child credits are zeroing out their tax rates. So that's almost 75. That's almost three-quarters of all of them right there. It's the elderly and the working poor. And then you got 5% with itemized deductions. That's the 3,000 multimillionaires and billionaires who paid no income taxes last year. 5.6% getting education credits to zero out their taxes. In other words, they're making just a little bit more than what you have to make to pay federal income taxes, but they're also putting their kids through school. 1.3% don't pay any income taxes because they have capital gains and dividend rates. This is how Mitt Romney doesn't pay income taxes. It's really pretty mind-boggling. And on top of that, Romney is like dreaming of the days of his father and his grandfather. His great-grandfather, of course, moved from Utah down to Mexico so that they could have a polygamous compound down there. So he could have his multiple wives, because that's what good Mormons did back in the 19th century when Utah voted in, I think it was 1890, to make polygamy illegal. And then he stayed down there, and his dad was born down in Mexico, which raises the interesting question, how could his dad run for president? Well, apparently there's different standards if you're a white guy than if you're a black guy. Like nobody, when Mitt Romney Sr. was running, or George Romney, excuse me, when George Romney was running for president of the United States, he was born in Mexico. Nobody even raised the issue. Why? He's a white guy. That should tell you something. But anyhow, Mitt wasn't born in Mexico. His dad was. And so he's making this joke about how, geez, if my dad had just stayed in Mexico, I could have been born down there and I could call myself a Latino. And then I'd get a lot more votes. Yeah, Mitt. That's a good one. Cora in Taos, New Mexico, listening on KVOT. Hey, Cora, what's on your mind today?
Well, I was just thinking that Mitt Romney has been consistent in one thing. He thinks he can buy his way into everything. He
has all his life.
Yeah, he doesn't want to put an effort into it. So, I mean, the wife is put in a really crappy apartment. The dog is on the roof of the car. Let Detroit fail. Let the foreclosures happen quickly. And then this is the big thing. The Palestinians don't want peace, and they're basically homeless, worthless people that do not have a good ethos. Therefore, they cannot better themselves. So let's don't bother with the Palestinians.
Right.
And he just lumped 47% of the Americans in that same category.
Right. Yeah. This is the guy who wants to be president of all of us and who wants to sit in the chair that Jimmy Carter, who damn near brought peace to the Middle East. I mean, he was within just, throwing distance of it. And had he got a second term, had Ronald Reagan's campaign manager, Bill Casey, not cut that deal with the Iranians to hold the hostages until the minute that Ronald Reagan put his hand on the Bible. That was literally that minute was the minute that they released the hostages. Had Bill Casey not cut that deal with the Iranians, Jimmy Carter would have gotten a second term. And I believe we would have seen a complete peace between the Palestinians and the Israelis. And three-quarters of the disturbances that we're seeing in the Muslim world anyway right now would not be happening. But, yeah, very, very well said, Cora. Thank you very much. Thanks for the call. Tony in Stafford, Virginia. Hey, Tony, thanks for listening to Sirius XM. What's up?
It's about the taxes. I always was under the impression that all employers had to withhold income tax from your checks.
I don't know. None of my actually, I don't do the payroll for my company, so I don't know. I don't think any of my employees make so little that we wouldn't, although we do have a couple of part-time. I just don't know. I know everybody has to withhold, you have to withhold payroll taxes.
Yeah, but look at a waitress. They make in Virginia here something like $2.30 an hour.
Right.
But then they have to report how much they made in tips, and a lot of times they're walking out of there at the end of the week with zero.
Yeah.
Because everything was eaten up by tax. And also about the income tax, ain't that the standard deduction adjusted for inflation?
Yes.
So if wages are stagnant, more people are going to not be paying income tax.
Well, the fact of the matter is that if you go back to the Clinton years, it was about 35% of Americans were earning so little or were on Social Security. Keep in mind, that's about half of them. About half of them are on Social Security, and about half of them, so about 15%, were earning so little that they didn't pay federal income taxes. And that 30, in the 30s% stood right up until the Bush recession. And then when the economy started to fall in 2007, and when it really went into the free fall in 2008, that's when you saw those numbers cross the 40% threshold. And we're now at 47% because we're in the middle of a Great Depression, the Bush Great Depression. I mean, let's call it what it is. And as soon as America gets back to work, and I frankly think that's going to happen in the next 4 or 5 years, I think we may have another big clunk or thump before then. We'll see. But whether we do or not, I still think that, within 6 or 7 years from now, we will be back on our feet solidly and growing. And when we are, you're going to see that number back down around 30%. And if we raise the minimum wage up to $10, $11, $12, $13 an hour, you'd see that number drop down to 15 or 20%, and it would just be people who are old enough that their income is Social Security, and they make a little enough on it that they're not paying taxes on it, even though Ronald Reagan started taxing Social Security benefits. So, Tony, you're absolutely right. Thank you. Well said. John in Minneapolis. Hey, John, what's on your mind today?
Well, you just covered it, but I listened to Democracy Now! This morning, and they were the only news outlet that I listened to that also included the comment about Latinos, that he would, if he was from a Latino background, that he would have a better shot at the White House. And that is very insulting to a lot of Latinos. I'm originally from New Mexico. My sister-in-law is a Mexican that was born in Arizona. Her father was an immigrant, and he did not get very many chances. He had to work doubly hard at everything he did. And, they just, like MSNBC, National Public Radio, gave a free ride on that because they edited that out. And I've called and complained about it, and I urge people to talk to NPR and also MSNBC and say, why is it that you have not included that in that Mother Jones piece?
Right. Here it is right here. This Shane's got this thing pulled out. Here it is.
My heritage, my dad, you probably know, was the governor of Michigan and was the head of a car company, but he was born in Mexico. And had he been born of Mexican parents, I'd have a better shot of winning this, but he was born of America. He's living in Mexico. They lived there for a number of years, and I say that jokingly, but it would be helpful to be Latino.
It would help me a lot to be Latino, right? John, well said, well pointed out. Bob, hang on just a second here. Bob in Brooklyn, New York, listening on WWRL. Hey, Bob, what's up?
Oh, hi, Tom. Yeah, you mentioned Ronald Reagan. I have some information about Reagan, if I may. If I could just say one quick thing about Romney, though. I mean, there are people who are in the 10% tax bracket right now who get no benefits from the government and pay a lot of federal tax.
Right.
So I don't know what he's talking about. And, of course, the Republicans will raise taxes on most people by eliminating deductions for things like, property tax, medical expenses, premiums on health insurance. So,
Paul Ryan wants to get rid of all those. If you got rid of all of those so-called loopholes, you still couldn't balance the budget without raising taxes on rich people, which Ryan and Romney swear they're not going to do. And your point is really well taken. Even somebody working part-time, even somebody making $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a year, working part-time as a greeter at Walmart, 100% of their income is taxed with the payroll tax. And that's why, and the income tax is what only kicks in when you start making serious bucks. And that's why the Republicans always say, 47% of Americans pay no income taxes. Now, sometimes they lie and say pay no taxes. That's just a flat-out lie. But these are the numbers that Limbaugh and the others, these are the right-wing wackadoodles have been throwing around for years.
Yeah, they're going to hurt the people who can least afford it. They're going to raise their taxes. I mean, I actually called about Reagan. Can you hear about that?
Sure, yeah. We got about 40 seconds here. It's all yours.
Oh, well, listen, Ronald Reagan was the biggest hypocrite in the world because when he was president, his administration supported some of the biggest spending boondoggles. Here in New York, they supported the Westway Project. This was an enormous boondoggle to build a real estate development and highway project. Mm-hmm. Reagan was there in a newspaper with a hard hat and a big goofy smile on his face. They supported something called there was another scandal here. WedTech. Mm-hmm. His administration was rigging government contracts to give it to a small company in the Bronx. Right. And there were friends of Ed Meese that were on the payroll there.
Well, of course. And let us not forget Star Wars. $1 trillion to his buddies in the defense industry, the military-industrial complex that Dwight Eisenhower warned us about. Bob, spot on. Thanks a lot for the call. Thanks for listening to WWRL. We'll be back 45 minutes past the hour. Thom Hartmann here with you.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
How is it that working poor people who call themselves Republicans, who just got kicked in the teeth by Mitt Romney, are going to continue to support Republicans?